Very simply, the worst flight of my life. Hi there, my name is Kevin, and I make honest and to-the-point, narrated trip reports about flights and unique hotels all over the world. This is episode 143 on the channel's 30th airline, Gulf Air. This flight was in business class from Bangkok to Bahrain. Get your popcorn, the full experience begins in 10 seconds. And welcome to Bangkok, right now on the way to Suvarnabhumi Airport to the east of the city center. If you'd like to know the exact fare that I paid for this joyous and heartwarming experience, or my next 5 videos in queue, please check out the description below. I'm gonna start this one very clearly. Everything you'll see in this video is my own honest opinion based on what actually happened on my specific flight. Whether or not Gulf Air is a wonderful or terrible airline is kinda besides the point in this video. It's just an authentic account of my trip because this flight is 100% self-funded. This is not a channel that thrives on making negative videos. Feel free to check out my favorite flights and hotels from around the world linked in the top right of your screen now. Alright, let's open this can of worms. It all started out well enough. I took this flight as part of my route to get from Southeast Asia to Rome, where I had 2 cruises departing from. I booked a couple of months in advance. Actually, I was originally supposed to be flying Scoot Biz from Bangkok to Gatwick, but that flight was cancelled in July, so here we are. The check-in hall was busy and an absolute wonderful thing to see, and I'm really loving all of the new signage upgrades that Suvarnabhumi has recently made. The first being these check-in counter wait time boards, something that I don't think I've ever seen in another airport, and a very clever idea, assuming that they're actually accurate and maintained. With no one in the business class line, my check-in process took a matter of minutes and found out that the flight was today actually full, as I tried to switch out of my bulkhead seat, which I'll explain later. On to priority security screening and immigration we went, which combined took all of 5 minutes. Gulf Air, and Oman Air for that matter, hold a very fascinating niche in the market of Middle Eastern airlines, classifying themselves as boutique regional airlines with a few longer routes to complement their networks. Gulf Air, the smaller of the two, has a route map that is designed to connect Pakistan and India to other spots in the Middle East and Europe, with a few other Asian routes for good measure. I was very much looking forward to this flight, honestly. Before today, this was probably in the top 5 airlines globally that I was truly excited to try. I don't really know why, to be honest, I just was. As we walk to the lounge, we can take in all of the brand new shopping at the airport. Most, if not all of this, was closed during COVID and remodeled. It felt so nice to just have my first normal, near post-COVID experience here. Gulf Air uses one of the miracle lounges of the many in Bangkok, which I am not really a fan of, so I instead headed to the Air France KLM lounge, which was near my gate anyway. By the way, if you support honest and authentic travel reviews, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe so that you don't miss any of my videos. Your support is truly appreciated. I also like the signs that now show the logo of the lounges, making it much easier to navigate. Suvarnabhumi's layout is so simple that sometimes it really is easy to get turned around because every direction kinda always looks the same. This lounge, which I accessed with my priority pass along with the Oman Air lounge, are 2 of my favorite at this airport, with Turkish Airlines probably coming in 3rd, as far as priority pass lounges go. The Air France lounge is the only one with apron views though. The food on offer was fine, nothing all that special, but plenty of selection if you were hungry. I was saving space though for what I thought would be a fantastic meal on board. I'll give you a 93-second history of Gulf Air. They were founded in 1950 as an air taxi service between Bahrain, Doha, and Dhahran. The year after launching, BOAC, British Overseas Airways Corporation, bought a 22% share of the airline. It grew at a steady clip for the next couple of decades. In 1973, a consortium of 4 governments combined to take over the airline and buy out BOAC's share. The sale resulted in the airline being owned equally by the then Emirate of Bahrain, the State of Qatar, the Emirate of Abu Dhabi, and the Sultanate of Oman. Everything was going swimmingly, until, that is, Emirates was found in 1985. Gulf Air's profits immediately dropped 30%, and the next year they posted their very first yearly loss. Being owned by 4 oil-rich countries certainly helped though. So they kept trucking on and started a short-lived service to New York's JFK from Bahrain, Abu Dhabi, and Doha from 1994 until 1997. As Emirates grew though, Gulf Air shrank. In 2002, James Hogan became the CEO. If you're unfamiliar, he's the guy that nearly drove Etihad into the ground by investing in a dozen or so airlines that went bankrupt. He was at the helm until 2006. In 2002 though, Qatar exited the airline to form their own. In 2006, Abu Dhabi did the same and formed Etihad and took Hogan with them. 2007 saw Oman inevitably withdraw to focus on Oman Air, and Bahrain became the sole owner. The 2010s brought many years of losses, likely continuing until now, but despite that, the airline announced a rebirth of sorts in 2016, ordering an entirely new fleet and declaring themselves as a boutique airline in 2019. In at least 4 of the announcements on board, the hostile purser concluded with, quote, Gulf Air named Skytrack's most improved airline in the world. To which I need to ask, what the hell were you doing to passengers 2 years ago? Because today's flight was the envy of absolutely no one. When I booked my flights, I chose the bulkhead seat kind of on autopilot, only to see many reviews later that recommended avoiding the seat because of the curvature of the aircraft. I do really love the livery though. It comes off as white on camera, but it's actually a very pale cream color, which does class up the billboard titles a bit. Alright, all that fun that you're here for is about to begin. So let's quickly check out the flight stats. We took off 14 minutes late and headed up to 38,000 feet for our 3,300 mile journey to Manama, where we would land 44 minutes ahead of schedule. Everything was totally normal, and I was excited to get on board. My camera is mounted to my spinner bag, my way of not putting the camera in people's faces directly. The crew at the door was helping a wheelchair passenger, so I just waited for him to come back, and then this happened.
How are you, sir? Good, yeah. Very good. Is this...
Yes, he turned off my camera. He lectured me about how it's inappropriate to film on board, and he will not permit it. With his hands, he was motioning to mean that I could not film the cabin or any of the common areas. I was honestly so shocked that he touched my phone, let alone stopped the recording, that I just walked to my seat on autopilot. And a beautiful seat that it was. Apex suites are one of my favorite configurations. Shame I wasn't able actually to sleep. You'll see why. The business class cabin, which they call Falcon Gold, is comprised of 26 lie-flat, all-aisle access seats. The reason I was trying to get a different window seat was because the fuselage curves in at the front row, but in reality, it wasn't that big of a deal. Row 3 is missing a window though, so you'll want to avoid it. If you're extra tall, you should definitely try to get the bulkhead seats, as the bed will be a bit longer at a whopping 77 inches long, or 196 centimeters. I apologize for the quality of these shots of the cabin, but I had to quickly get them as we deplaned. Here you can see the width of the gap to access the window seats, and here is the pass-through that the aisle seats have as a storage nook. Pre-departure drinks were passed out by a very friendly Russian flight attendant. There were 4 crew serving the business class cabin. For the bulkhead seats, the footrest folded down below the TV monitor. Considering Apex suites typically have really poor storage options, I found this configuration to actually be pretty good. The IFE remote was in a silly spot though, since that's precisely where your arm would naturally go. And that thing would get as hot as lava for some reason. Overall though, the fit and finish of the seat was very nice and high quality. In order to not put your arm on the remote, I suppose that you're supposed to put your arm in this little armrest prison. Below that was more storage where I found my used headset thrown inside. The USB port, outlet, and headphone jack were all in here as well. Legroom is fantastic though, and I can honestly say that the seat does really feel spacious. I understand some don't like Apex suites because they say they feel claustrophobic, but personally I just disagree. Bottles of water and hot towels were handed out. By this point, the purser who turned my camera off had come over to my aisle for the sole purpose of looking at me 3 times. There was also another set of seat controls on the other armrest. No overhead vents unfortunately, but I did find a solution for the overheating remote. I was in need of designated mint storage anyway.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome on board Gulf Air, the world's most improved airline.
There's also a center divider which can be raised and lowered between each pair of seats. The pillow, which had clearly been used, was very nice and fluffy and had not 1, but 2 hairs on it, I guess souvenirs. Then we had the blanket. Okay, an eyelash on the outside of it. Then I was filming the inside of the blanket as I always do to give you an idea of if it's plush or not, and in this case to show you all of the pilling. And we found another souvenir. Another hair. Okay, pillow and blanket, no thank you. Slippers were handed out, and I swear I'm not nitpicking simply because I'm bitter, but these were honestly the cheapest quality business class slippers that I've ever had. Pajamas were handed out. For the full cabin, they had 1 size, medium, very convenient. I normally collect anything that I'm allowed to, that is branded by airlines, but these were so cheap that I just left them on board. Pushback began and a storm was brewing. There were also clouds outside. By this point, I had a feel for the crew. There was the purser, the 2 male flight attendants, one of which I did not interact with, and the other was completely, utterly incompetent, and the friendly Russian one, who I actually feel bad for, because she was well-intentioned at every point along the way, but always scrambling to make up for the shortcomings of the other crew, causing her to also frequently forget orders and the like. Here are the used headphones. This is exactly how I pulled them out of the storage cubby. I'm sure they were excellent. And a nice reading light above your shoulder. We taxied to the runway, and I began counting Qatar aircraft. I spotted 5 of them along the way. This brings me to my number 1 rule when flying. Don't get arrested. So, was I a complete pushover on this flight? You betcha. Why? Because I was flying to Bahrain and I'm not dumb. My friend was still on Kevin's surveillance duty, and I was not even going to attempt to mount anything to the windows, so I was handheld for all these shots. Until, of course, he walked over and again forced me to turn it off. So as soon as he walked over and came to my seat, I stopped recording, which I absolutely hate myself for now, because I wish that I caught what he said on camera. You know how your parents, when you did something wrong as a kid in public, how they scream at you, but in a whisper, kinda like, "You cannot record." Yeah, so that's how he was talking to me now. He told me that I wasn't allowed to film outside of the window because of military security reasons. I simply replied, "What?" And he went on to tell me that it's illegal to film any aircraft in Thailand. Yeah, okay, buddy. Also, for the record, I was connecting onto another flight to Istanbul on Gulf Air after this, and I had a lovely crew. I had a chat with the purser, didn't mention anything about this flight, but just asked him, does Gulf Air have a policy that doesn't allow filming on board? Because he had clearly seen me filming the whole flight, and he told me that he knows of no such policy. Alrighty, time to get going. This is going to be fun. We took off to the south and then turned westward. The spool up and takeoff coming up next. I realized that I don't think I've ever flown west from Bangkok during the day and got this incredible view of the entire city and the Chao Phraya River. Alright, let's get into the meal service. And by the way, there were no amenity kits loaded for our flight today. The male flight attendant came around serving Arabic coffee. You know, how they pour it into the stack of cups and then you take the cup? Well, he poured it, then he stopped and he looked at it for a second or two, then decided that it looked great and handed it to me. This was the chunky variety of coffee, I guess. Here's the full menu. I will note that in 2 places on this menu, it ironically says that you can dine on demand and eat anytime you want. Our orders were taken just after takeoff, and we were told that the meal service would begin shortly. There was no alcohol on the menu, but I know Gulf Air isn't dry, so I asked the male flight attendant if they had any wine. He said yes. I asked what kind of red wine they had. He said, quote, "A French one. A good one." Unquote. Okay, so a good French one it was. I watched the sunset and took a look at the IFE. The system itself was very good and up to date with a nice bright screen, but the selection which you can see on your screen now was nothing to write home about. Alright, time for the first course, soup. The soup, a degree or 2 below lukewarm, and honestly tasted nothing like roasted garlic as described, but it tasted fine. What wasn't fine though were the dirty utensils. Some of them just didn't feel clean. You know how when you touch something and it just feels like there's a little residue on it? Well, my fork actually also had food bits dried onto it. And the pepper shaker, hard to see on camera, had bits of something all over it. Next up was supposed to be a salmon starter. I pointed it out to the female flight attendant and she apologized profusely. I said no problem, I'll just take it next. This is supposed to be chicken biryani. I wanted to make sure that I didn't make a fool of myself by incorrectly saying that this is not biryani, but I researched all over the internet and I could not find a single biryani covered in sauce. It was not good. The chicken was gristly, the baby corn was near raw, and the sauce was just red. Didn't taste like much anything. Alright, so by this point, I was already getting really annoyed with the service, because at this point, I planned to be sleeping already. This was my first of 3 flights, with 2 6-hour layovers. The salmon tart eventually showed up and was actually the highlight of the meal. I finally gave up, laid down, and I swear, not 5 minutes later, dessert finally came around on a clunky, noisy cart. 4 hours and 8 minutes after takeoff. And I was the first served dessert from the single cart. The purser and the male flight attendant took at least 20 minutes to finish the cabin. The coconut tart was disgusting. Like the scent of bad refrigeration disgusting. At that point, I just made the executive decision to stay awake and started caffeinating myself and watching Netflix. Here you can see how nice the bed would have been. That is, if there had been a clean pillow and blanket. The lights were kept on throughout the entire flight, and I should mention that I was really starting to feel uncomfortable at this point, like genuinely uncomfortable. The purser was serving the other aisle, but like clockwork would come over to my side, stare me down for 2 seconds, and then disappear. It's honestly the only time I've ever really wanted to get off of an airplane. I let out a mini involuntary laugh as less than an hour after I had dessert, they came around with another cart for the second meal service, which, as we'd be landing in 75 minutes, needed to be served soon. I took a bite from each. They ranged from okay to that same bad refrigeration category as the previous dessert. Finally, we were approaching Bahrain, and we seemed to do some kind of corkscrew twice just north of Qatar as part of our descent. A very interesting approach. We landed, and I could not get off that plane fast enough. Ironically, the thumbnail of this video says never again, which is true, except for the fact that my next flight was also on Gulf Air. Alrighty, on to the flip-flop score. So what did you think? Amenities were missing. So many things were dirty or used or had hair on it. The purser was legitimately hostile towards me. Even besides him, the service sucked. The meal service took over 4 hours. The food was not good. The only redeeming quality was the seat itself, which was very comfortable. Despite this show of a flight, I do hope that you enjoyed this video and ask you to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe so that you don't miss a beat. I'll see you next time on my Gulf Air flight to Istanbul.